Grand Rising, everyone. Natalie coming to you live, brewing coffee, goat make coffee here. Mm, so yum. All right, let's get started. So I have been off again for quite some time. It's like taking these big long breaks, and partially because I am not 100% sure what I want to talk about anymore. Maybe I've run out of words. Maybe people get to the point where they understand that things are the way they are, and that's the way it is, and that's that. In other words, being present or aware of the present moment or being in the moment at the every particular moment in time and not necessarily needing to say anything. And I think as we dig deeper into our own internal psyche, as we start to peel back the layers of our internal psyche, we start to recognize that maybe there are no words to say. And also starting to think like, what difference am I possibly making? Because we all go through that as well, I think, especially practitioners of the great work, sort of looking at life and saying, am I making a difference? Does it even matter? And if we touch the life, so this morning when I was making my coffee, I started thinking, well, everybody says, well, if you touch one life, that's enough. And if you touch one life, that's enough, even if that life is your own, even if it's only your life that you're touching, that you're, um, you know, learning who you are and you're developing who you are and you touch your life alone, that's enough. And I don't think that we normalize that, right? It's like we've got to get bigger and bigger and bigger and support other people, and we have to leave our mark and our legacy. And some people strive, and I can say that I've strived, right, to leave a legacy of wisdom through these podcasts, through all the teachings and the readings and the ancient texts, plus, what we see today in the modern world, and, kind of my viewpoint and how I see the world and what I think is the construct of the psyche or the construct of how we see the sacred feminine and masculine, or how we bridge the cosmology to consciousness, to psychology, and to science, and all of those things. And giving a map of the soul basically from my perspective or point of view, which we see has those maps have been drawn out. Good morning, whoever's on here, have been drawn out by several individuals throughout time, where they were trying to express what the soul might look like, what the internal psyche might look like, how do we operate, how do we transcend. And I can tell you a bit about what I'm learning in terms of um, how certain people or individuals have created this construct. And integral theory is one of the theories that's been used, right, to develop or to show how consciousness has actually expanded or derived or developed, or how we've developed. So in human development, we're talking about how that works, right? And looking at it and saying that there is this sort of these lines, they call them lines and waves. And for me, I don't necessarily agree with a lot of the construct. And the reason why is because I preach what I practice. In other words, um, I live through experience and then I communicate, rather than communicate and then experience. I'm not saying I never do that. But my life is more a, a posh posh of experiences. And it's funny because you'll see that I go through different phases of my life where I'm experiencing new things. I'm trying new things out. Certain things don't work for me. And then I'm figuring out what works for me, what is going to actually work for me to reach those um the expanded states of consciousness, to expand and stretch consciousness, to allow myself to grow into the full potential that I am. And that is what I've been teaching. How do you grow into the full potential that you are? What is it going to take? Good morning, Ruthless. um what is it going to take, right, for you to develop into your full potential? There is a theory out there, they call it the acorn theory, and I sort of like this theory more than others, where they talk about, the seed, our potential has always been there. We were born with it, and perhaps we even knew what it was when we were little. And the problem is that, life and circumstances and conditioning told us it's the rock that changed my name. Oh, well, there you go. That's awesome. Why ruthless? I'd love to know. Um, so we expanded, and from that tiny potential, right? Like maybe when we were children, we understood who we were. And then, of course, what ends up happening is life and people and programming and circumstances and our genius, right? That everybody has that potential, that seed of potential to be the best version of who we are has already been there. It's already there, but we sometimes ignore it. Sometimes we go the opposite direction. We know in a way what's right for us. They always say, follow your gut, all this stuff. And that seed of potential is just laying there ready to sprout, but sometimes we don't let it sprout. Now, in this particular theory, they also talk about bad seeds, right? That there's bad seeds that are there from the beginning too, and we do see that in human conditioning, right? We see that there are individuals who are born and start doing crazy things, and we can go into like individuals who are, you know, serial killers, all this stuff. We see their what's in there already when they're young, and there's these certain behaviors that they have. um and however, I believe that that seed could be turned for good and sown, right? That's my belief. Now, I'm not saying that that's an actual truth. And I'm not even saying that this theory is true either. But I do like the idea of the theory, right? I can't say anything is 100% true ever. I would never say that, right? I don't hold the key to all truth. But I do hold the key to experience. And I think that's what's important more than anything else is experiencing life, right? So for instance, the rock, you're a ruthless Christian. Part of Christianity and even that faith is, or even that religion or that construct is faith. Faith is a huge thing, right? Having faith. I was raised, I think I've told you guys, I was raised Catholic, and a lot of it was just faith, right? Like having this faith and knowing full through and through that something was going to happen. Now, can we prove it scientifically? Well, no, of course science is always going to say we can't prove it scientifically, but it doesn't matter because we've experienced it, and our experiences are just as real. And see, that's what's been discredited from mainstream science, right? But now, because again, we have the quantum physics piece, we're starting to integrate the um mysticism back into science, because they don't know how to describe what they're seeing. They have no words for it, they have no understanding. um and it doesn't really align with our old construct of classical physics, and you guys already know this, and so the two don't align. So they're trying to figure out, well, what is it? Well, for me, I have a new thing, and it's preach what I practice. So rather than looking at what I think I know, right, really apply it to your life. And that is part of the spiritual alchemy. And I am a practitioner of spiritual alchemy. So people say, well, what's your religion? I don't have a religion. I'm a practitioner of spiritual alchemy, meaning that I apply these principles to my life and I see what happens. And I can tell you that faith for me is a practice. It's a practice for me to have faith, and that's inherently in me. Now, that doesn't mean that everybody has to wear that, you know, robe of faith. It may not work out. Some people are like, I don't have faith. Okay, so what is your practice, right? It's not for me to dictate what's going to work for you, but practice is what's important. And this is why I love kung fu. And so I did actually get my black belt in kung fu finally. But it's a never ending cycle. It makes me a disciple of the art, but not necessarily, it takes years and years and years to become a master in kung fu. Why? Well, because it's a process and it's practice. Now, kung fu itself, the word, means mastery through practice, right? It's the practicing of the art. That's all it means. So Kung Fu think people think it's fighting, all this stuff. No, it's not. It's mastery through time and effort. And when we put our time and effort in things that we love and we start to practice it, we get a result. Now, here's what I'm going to say: preach what you practice rather than practice what you preach. Conceptually, we can talk about all the things we know, but when we apply it, it's something different. And the seed, so getting back to the acorn and the seed that lives within us, that potential is constantly giving us experiences so that we can grow and blossom into the radiant, beautiful self that you are. So, they call us star seeds. They say they're star seeds. We're all star seeds. We all are. And our seed was planted there from the beginning. But will it develop, and will we allow it to develop? Will we nourish it? Will we let it blossom? Will we let it sprout and grow into the great, magnificent being that we are called to? And it's been a difficult time. I can say that, especially now during these times when economies are going crazy, when life is going crazy, and our everything inside of us is telling us to go one direction, but everything outside of us is trying to push us in another. Becomes a challenge, right? This battle, almost this war, happens between our internal wanting and our external happening, and it doesn't line up, and it's not an easy task, right? So we have to sort of stop the noise and then really, really, really hone in to the core of who we are. Now that takes peeling back the layers of the onion. And this is why not many people take this road. It's because it's not easy. Okay. The Holy Spirit. Yeah. And so the Holy Spirit being a part of it. And, there's different language for different religious sects, which are saying the same thing, you know, and that's why there's more than one way to expand consciousness and to reach your divine purpose. There's different ways to get there. There's no right, wrong, good way, bad way to do it. It's your way. And so that way can evolve and expand in many different ways. So that is why spiritual alchemy doesn't say, oh, it uh, Christian this or bad or Muslim bad or that. No, that's not what it's about. It says what's within the system. What is the system telling you to do, right? So literally we go through the process that's been given to us, and we ask ourselves, how do we apply it to our life, and how do we preach what we practice? It's a different way of life. I even feel like creating a workshop around it, preach what you practice, and sit there and really talk about how we've experienced life rather than what we think we know about life. Okay. Yeah, man made the system, not a godly system. Yeah, that's correct. And we've sort of distorted it, um, and almost to a detriment. I mean, I don't know. We've gone so far as a human species thinking that we have dominion over everything, which, I think someone must have changed that in the Bible. I don't believe we have dominion over everything. I think we need to be in harmony with everything. And I think that sentence right there really caused a lot of havoc. You see, words can create some major crazy crap in the world, and symbols and stuff. But when we look at that one particular sentence, dominion, right? We don't have dominion over everything. Well, everything is connected. Absolutely. The interconnection is what we have. And when you talk about facing persecution, yeah, it is our own mind trap that we face. Now, there's different layers here. So, and speaking from preaching what I practice, because like I said, I apply this to my life, and it's not easy. Trust me, things fall apart all the time. And most recently, family, right, fell apart, crumbled. And it was all for good, not for bad, right? There's a point where you have to understand that things don't change unless you change. Things won't shift unless you shift. And sometimes that means letting go of the people you love the most. That doesn't mean you don't love them. It doesn't mean you just love them at a distance. And sometimes you need that space and time in order to reprogram, because sometimes it suffocates you, right? You can see it as like, the great mother or the great father suffocating their children and not allowing them to develop and blossom, right? I myself have done that with my niece, right? I suffocated her. I totally like was a helicopter aunt. I'm not her mom, and her mom wasn't even the way I was, and that's not right. I had to let go and let her develop into her own person, and we get to do that. And sometimes when we're not letting go of people, we're suffocating them, we're drowning them from actually expanding into their own potential. Now this is a hard lesson. It's not easy to let go of people we love. It's not easy to cut the cord, especially family, if you're close to your family, or especially if you have kids, or especially if you have a lover that you've been with for a long time. Whatever it is, we want to hold on so strong, and the more that we hold on, the harder it is to grasp, right? It's almost like a fish, a slippery fish. We're trying to grab it and we can't, and it keeps slipping out of our hands. Let it go. Let it go, right? And there's a saying, what's meant for me will be. It'll be magnetized. What my friend said, she's like, what's meant for me will be. And I like that. I like the idea of that, because I can say, well, if it's meant for me, it'll be. If it's meant for me, it'll come into my life. Good morning, Christina. Good morning. And good morning, YR. I don't know what your name is. You're welcome to drop it in the chat. But if it is meant to be, and it'll come to you. Now, preaching what you practice, here's what I've gone through, and hopefully you guys can relate, and hopefully you guys will apply it to your life as well, is that peeling back the onion layers, right, was a really me looking at myself and how I connect to the world. How do I engage in the world, and taking personal responsibility. Now, not an easy task, because part of it's like, we'll take responsibility for everything, and people will say, well, I didn't do that, or I didn't do this. Well, okay, maybe there are things that are happening in your life, but there's a lesson to be learned. And how are you responsible for that? And then boundaries, right? Hey Bart, how do we create boundaries? How do we let go of things that are not good for us? How do we start to develop our life the way it should be? And that's a hard thing, right? Because again, we get attached to things. Now, we could look at the system of Buddhism, where it says attachment is the root of all our suffering. We're attached to everything. It's part of the human condition, right? It's part of the development of our ego. Ego not being a bad thing, ego being something that's healthy to help us survive, because we need it. We need survival skills. We need to be able to survive, or we would just die, right? We would perish, but we don't. We live. So we grow our ego. And in the development of ego, we grow consciousness. And the consciousness allows us to engage with life. So looking at life, looking at how we engage life, how consciousness is a part of that, how we develop through those stages. Now, we get programmed by our caretakers, and our caretakers, right, are our parents, or whoever your caretaker was when you were a baby. So there's some root stuff going on there. And to peel back the onion layers, right? Me, I've used different modalities to understand. And one of the biggest ones that I think that has been taken out of society, has taken out of psychology, because we are so science based, especially in the Western world, is the mythology, the story, the grand story, and these myths. Go back to myths. Myths help us to understand sort of where we are in our life. Myths are storytelling. And if we thought about it in the ancient time, they were storytellers that stood around and told us stories for a reason, because we know that history sort of repeats itself. We kind of do the same thing. Maybe things look different around us, but we're kind of doing the same thing over and over again, just a little bit different. But those stories give us an idea. They give us an opportunity to see it from a bigger construct, rather than from the victimization of something. And then we can see who we are in that myth, and we can understand who we are and move through it. So, but there's different ways, right? And these are ways that I have used that help a lot. Another way is hypnotherapy. You can try that, and see if that works for you. I've done hypnotherapy. You can do a tarot readings. You can go to a tarot reader, which is not someone who predicts the future, but it's more of a diagnostic. It gives you an idea to see things a little bit differently. You can look at astrology. I mean, there's all these systems that are supporting you to try to help you understand yourself better. And if you use it that way and you use it to find that core, that seed, that potential that was in you when you were a child, here's the deal. I think a lot of people, and they don't talk about it, talk about, when I was a kid, I knew I had a purpose. I knew I had, this calling. I used to see things, or, a lot of their gifts were given to them as children, but they weren't really able to evolve if they weren't in a condition or a household that really nurtured that within them, or they didn't recognize it. Me myself, that happened, right? I was this very curious kid. I just would be like, how did I land in this family? I think I'm an alien in this family. And I used to say it all the time. Um, and my parents were so busy trying to make things work within this society, this construct, they didn't recognize, they didn't see it. They didn't really truly see my potential. But I saw it for myself. And that was enough. But some children, they don't see their own potential right away. Or they know their potential's there, but because it's just ignored, they just let it go away, or they let go of it and they say forget it. Well, so black sheep beauty. Thanks. So just a totally different construct, right, in the mind. And then you separate and you start to understand and evolve. But again, there's many systems. So I say figure out what your system is and then preach what you practice. Go practice it. Don't be afraid to practice. Some things aren't going to work for you. You're going to put them on and you're going to say this ain't it. And that's okay. You can go down many. There's yoga, there's so many different systems, kundalini breathing that you can do. There's people do psychedelics even. And I'd be a little careful with the psychedelics because sometimes that can give you like a false connection. But if you, especially if you're overdoing it, but psychedelics, there's drumming. Drumming will ignite that um, sort of mystical experience within you. There's other ways that you could do it. Meditation is a big one to like find your center, who you are. You can journal. There's so many practices, so many different ways of getting to the same place. It's like to get to the mountaintop, there's different trails. Some people like to take the trail that somebody carved out, and some people will go on that trail for a while, then make their own trail, then get back on it. Some people will completely make their own trail and say, I'm going to do it my way. And that's a harder way, right? When you do it your way, that. Everybody kind of knows that, right? You have your elders who tell you, don't do this, don't do that. And you have the one you're always like, they're going to have a hard life. They're just wanting to do it their own way. But it's harder that way, but sometimes it's more rewarding that way too, because you discover things that other people don't. So when you go off the beaten path, you're seeing things that other people may not have seen, but it's still harder, right? Than just following maybe the trail that somebody kind of laid out for you. And then there's both and I think I'm a both and person. I think I go up a trail until I don't agree. And then I kind of take my own route and then I find new things out and discover. And then I come back to the trail and I add back value to the trail and say, hey, I don't think you guys thought about this because when I took my trail, that didn't fit. So, and then you start to be innovative, right? Because when we think about these great sages, whatever gurus, whatever you want to call them, they literally were the same thing. They went off the beaten path and said, "No, that doesn't. The old way doesn't really work. There's sort of this thing." And then people start to go, "Oh yeah, I agree because I've seen that," and then they start to come along. So, but you have your way, you have your path. Okay, and it starts with the seed of potential that was already there within you. It was already there. You were a star seed. The seed was already given to you. You literally did start off as a seed. If you don't know that, right? you you guys were baby seeds getting sprouted, right? A sperm and an egg. And there you go. And then you developed into this magnificent human being. I mean, how crazy is that? It's kind of cool, right? And we think about how that happens in the womb. Well, it's like a cosmic eruption, thinking about everything that happens and goes into making you as this human being as you are, right? A lot went into it. And it took two people coming together to even make that happen. So we get to understand how we evolve through that seed. So go back and preach what you practice. Go out and practice something. I practice right now, my practice is Kung Fu, which I love. And I can see how this ancient tradition, if I were to say that any system was close to spiritual alchemy, it would be Kung Fu. I mean, these monks were quite amazing. They worked in harmony with nature. They they mirrored nature. They looked at nature and they said, how can we be like nature? How can we embody the wind? How can we embody the earth? How can we embody the cosmos? How can we embody the animals and the creatures of the earth? And they watched and they observed, and they didn't try to kill them. They just tried to emulate them. They tried to look and say, wow, how does this like how does this bug operate? Well, we see a mantis, right? And that's where you have the mantis forms and all this and that. And then you have tiger forms, right? And they looked at the wild, and rather than trying to harm a tiger, no, they learned to become it and understand it and move like one, which is cool. And they used it for protection and also health, for health purposes and to live long, healthy lives. That's really what they did it for. Um, but nobody would mess with them either because they were deadly. I mean, they were martial artists, right? But they weren't out there because the higher up you get in kung fu, the more peaceful you become. Tai chi being the grand ultimate fist, which people don't know. If you didn't know, now you know that tai chi is the ultimate form of kung fu. It is the deadliest form of kung fu. And nobody knows that because they think tai chi is all about breath and moving slow, and it is, but it takes 30 years for you to actually master that art. And you'd have to practice it every single day. But the Tai Chi master is the ultimate master of Kung Fu, which is the yin yang, meaning that you've totally embodied the sacred feminine and masculine energies within. So you have explosive power, but you also have flow and freedom. It's pretty cool. The yin yang is actually the symbol for Tai Chi. And that's a symbol that's used. So these systems, right? The information that was there, that was carved out for us, is still there. And what a beautiful system. You have that ability to find your system, your practice. What is your practice? I don't know. It could be journaling, it could be writing, it could be music, it could be dancing, it could be art, drawing, painting, coloring, it could be I don't know, hiking, um rock climbing. I mean, there are so many things, right, that it could be for you. So go out and practice. I think that's probably why I haven't been on here very much, is because I'm just living my life in this sort of crazy but peaceful way. Like I'm in the eye of a storm right now, and the storm is starting to calm down. Um, and I'm trying to say, how do I give back and does it matter? And so, again, this morning it was like, if I support one person, that's enough, even if that person is me. And I think if you live with that in your life, I think if you lived with that sort of saying in your mind, right? If I impact one person, if I change the life of one person and that person is me, then I've done enough. And I can tell you that changing yourself is enough. It's really hard I know people want to give back to humanity, and that's me. I'm like, oh, I want to give back in this. Well, give to yourself first. Learn to know yourself first. Practice yourself before you try to practice with others. Practice who you are. And I say practice because it is a practice. We're trying to learn how to be human. No one came with the manual book, I promise you. And the manual books don't work for everybody. So we're all trying to learn how to be human on this crazy planet that we're going on. And so as you find it and you start to tap into it, right? Practice, 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 practice. Kung Fu, mastery through time and effort. Everybody is doing kung fu when they're into their practice and their art. That's why a kung fu master will go to anywhere. Like me, I'll go anywhere and understanding the kung fu principle, and I will master things through time and effort. I will practice until I become a master at that thing. Just kind of like talking, right? Getting on here and doing live streams. I've done it so much, I've practiced so much that I just get on here and do it now. It's just a thing. And it's been a practice. It didn't just happen overnight. It was evolved, right, over time. And that's what you do. So preach what you practice. Remember that you are the potential, the seed that existed within you from the beginning of time. Your potential was already there. You just have to or get to tap into that potential and allow it to blossom. And that might mean peeling back the layers of the onion, which are really hard to do sometimes, and getting to that core essence of who you are, that core essence of what drives you, that purpose right at the center of all of it. And then once you tap into that, you just let it blossom, and the whole world becomes available to you. So hopefully that was helpful. I just got on here and I was like, man, I wasn't going to get on today again. I said, no, Natalie, you got to get on. You've got to get on. It's been some time. Um, but it's because, again, I'm just like truly living my life right now. And I think part of Spirit and Coffee, when I started it, was a way for me to understand deeper and communicate and support. Okay, so I'm committed to getting on here all week and connecting with you guys. So hopefully you guys will get on and join me. And if not, I'll just chat to myself. Which is totally fine as well. It is all good. Everything is blissful and beautiful in the world for me right now. So, you guys have a magnificent, marvelous, magical, mystical, magnetic Monday. And I will, of course, I'll be seeing you all tomorrow. Bye bye.